Sometimes the hardest part of change is learning to receive kindness when we least expect it. Yumi had always known the rhythm of the city, its structure, its busyness, its predictable distance between people. But when she and her husband decided to leave that life behind and move to the countryside, she wasn't fully prepared for what they would find. They weren't just moving houses. They were walking into an entirely different emotional world, one where walls weren't built from brick and mortar, but from hesitation, habit, and fear of the unknown. At first, the difference was startling. In the city, politeness was often silent, nods, short exchanges, eye contact that vanished in an instant. But here, neighbors offered tools without being asked. They lent their hands with sincerity. And most confusing of all to Yumi, they stayed to talk. They genuinely wanted to connect. And that kindness, that openness, didn't feel comfortable. Not yet. There's a curious part of the human brain that reacts to kindness as if it's a threat, especially when we're not used to it. Psychologists call it benevolence-induced discomfort. It happens when genuine acts of care conflict with our internal expectations, and instead of embracing them, we freeze, overthink, withdraw. For Yumi, friendliness didn't immediately translate to trust. It translated to confusion. Why were these people so nice? Did they expect something in return? Was this normal here? Or was she missing something? Her husband adjusted quickly, thanking the neighbors, laughing more easily, accepting help. But why Yumi... Yumi hesitated. Not because she was unfriendly, but because a lifetime of emotional self-protection doesn't disappear overnight. She worried about saying the wrong thing, sounding too distant or too eager. And in that fear, she began building her own quiet distance, even in a community that offered none. It's important to remember, not everyone who looks cold is unwilling to connect. Sometimes they're just learning how. Sometimes they've been hurt before, or they've lived so long in silence that even a simple hello feels like a leap across a canyon. That day, Yumi didn't say much, but she noticed. And something shifted, not outwardly, but internally, because kindness, when repeated gently and without demand, has a way of melting old walls. Human connection isn't always instant. Sometimes it's slow, like a sunrise that takes its time. But in those small moments, in the smiles, in the helping hands, in the quiet gestures without expectation, something beautiful starts to form. A bridge, a path forward, a reason to try again. And that's how it began for Yumi, not with a grand event, not with words, but with kindness that expected nothing in return, and a heart learning how to receive. Yumi woke up to a quiet she had never known before. Not the kind of silence that comes from isolation, but the kind that feels intentional, full of space. Space to breathe, to feel, to notice the things we often overlook. It was in that quiet that she began to hear something new, her own discomfort. Not loud, not overwhelming, just present. Even simple moments, like passing someone on a path, felt like small tests. Was she supposed to stop and talk? Was it rude to keep walking? Was friendliness here a rule or a ritual? Psychologists call this social recalibration, the emotional process of adapting to a new environment, especially one with different expectations around connection and community. For someone used to emotional boundaries and social formality, warmth can feel overwhelming at first. not because it's unwelcome, but because it requires vulnerability. And vulnerability, as we know, isn't something we all access easily. Yumi wanted to say thank you. She really did. But the words caught in her throat. And so, instead, she just opened the door slowly and let the gesture speak louder than anything she could have said. Sometimes, gratitude doesn't come out as a sentence. It lives in the way we hold the moment, quietly. Belonging isn't always about doing. Sometimes it's about being seen ... and choosing to stay. And that's what Yumi was doing. She was staying, even in her silence, even in her hesitation. She was showing up. Emotional growth often happens not in breakthroughs, but in soft, quiet acts of bravery. Smiling back when you're unsure. Accepting help when you'd rather hide. Letting someone in, even when your instincts say to keep the door closed. These are the quiet triumphs we rarely talk about, but they matter more than we know. It wasn't just the town that was changing. It was her. She was starting to feel safe in a place that once felt foreign. Not because the people changed, but because she allowed herself to trust, little by little. When we talk about transformation, we often picture big, dramatic shifts. But in truth, transformation can be so gentle, we barely notice it happening until one day we realize we no longer feel like a stranger in our own life. Yumi wasn't just learning to live in a new place. She was learning to live within herself, with more openness, more presence, and more courage than before. And that kind of change is the kind that lasts. There's something powerful about repetition. The same roads, the same morning light, the same neighbors waving from across the street. What once felt unfamiliar was now part of her routine, not because it had changed, but because she had softened into it. Yumi no longer hesitated when someone said hello. She no longer second-guessed a conversation or rehearsed responses in her head. What began as caution had become quiet confidence. The shift didn't happen overnight, but somewhere between nervous smiles and small favors, Yumi found her rhythm. Because emotional healing is often invisible. Yumi had begun to feel what every human longs for. A sense of place. A sense of self that no longer needs constant protection. There's something beautiful about full circle moments. That's when you realize you're no longer just adjusting to life. You're shaping it. This is the psychology of meaningful connection. We don't always know how our actions will ripple. We don't always see the results. But we can trust. Every small act of goodness plants a seed in others, in ourselves, in the world. The countryside didn't change Yumi. It invited her to become someone she always had the potential to be. More open, more grounded, more herself. Yumi wasn't running anymore. Not from fear, not from discomfort, not even from silence. She was walking with it, alongside it, as if it were an old companion. Because by now, she understood. Silence wasn't emptiness. It was space to feel, to reflect, to be present. The very people who once made her anxious had become part of her story, not because they demanded it, but because they welcomed her with patience. That's the quiet power of community. It doesn't rush you. It waits. And when you're ready, it opens its arms. Yumi didn't just learn how to live in a new place. It's a moment that mirrors her own from long ago. This story isn't just about Yumi. It's about all of us. Because at some point in life, we all feel like outsiders. In a new place, in a new relationship, even within ourselves. So if you ever find yourself in unfamiliar places, uncertain, distant, unsure of where you fit, remember Yumi? Remember that healing can be slow and that you don't have to rush. Sometimes the most extraordinary transformation comes from simply staying long enough to let love in.